Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to today's live stream legal show. I'm Judy the YouTube Lawyer, and I'm very happy to have a guest today who is actually one of my subscribers. He reached out to me and was willing to be a guest on a live stream show. So this is Joseph Kim. He's a 2L, a law school student at Notre Dame Law School in Indiana. So let's add Joseph to the screen. Hi, Joseph. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Judy. Thank you for having me.
Sure. Yeah. Well, welcome to the show. And why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. So, as Judy mentioned, I'm a 2L at Notre Dame Law School. I'm from California, Southern California, San Diego, and I kind of came to law school as a KJD, not really sure about what I was going to do with it, but I was really curious and eager, and kind of having made it through, I guess, a little more than halfway of the journey now. I'm here ready to share my experience, definitely share some of the things that I've picked up, and also learn more from Judy. I've learned a lot from her channel, and I really like it. I'm very sympathetic to sort of content creators in general, and supportive at the same time. So I'm happy that she was willing to have me here.
Yeah. Well, so are you thinking about doing your own YouTube channel, or have you tried your luck at trying to be a content creator yourself?
No, so I graduated with a business degree, and my business school had a lot of emphasis on, I guess, entrepreneurship. So I had a lot of friends that were doing things like setting up their own podcasts or their own YouTube channels. And I kind of saw the process for them, and how much energy they would put into it, and just how much even just a single person or a little bit of appreciation can really go a long way in sort of helping that their goals really manifest into something fruitful. So I think that's why I'm supportive. I do have some like audio equipment that I'm familiar with, and I've tried to help people where I can. So this mic right here is one of them. So that's just I don't really do much myself.
Mm-hmm. I see. Yeah, that's fine, because sometimes I see these law students with their vlogs and I'm like, you really should be spending time studying, because YouTube is not really worth it. I mean, I barely make maybe 50 cents an hour on many of my videos with the amount of time and the research and the editing and, you know, yeah, I mean, I think the chances of some law school student taking off as some influencer is very slim. So really the grades in law school is what they should be focusing on, but that's just my opinion. So
No,
yeah.
I think the same thing. Just how do they have the time to make all this content? But I appreciate it myself as a I guess consumer of a lot of them.
Yeah. So do you watch a lot of those other like law school student channels?
Uh, yeah, I think a lot of the if they ever get big, I definitely come across them. I think starting from law school admissions, a lot of people were making videos talking about really their own experience, but also giving advice where they could. And so I watched a lot of people's channels back then, and I still try to when I have time. But I'm a law student myself, so it's not like I have too much time to be watching either.
Yeah, yeah, you got to prioritize, right? So tell us more about your journey into deciding to go to law school.
So I think I always sort of had maybe a fascination with the idea of becoming a lawyer, or at least with the law. I remember back in middle school, I watched and this is an Asian American channel, so maybe some people will have seen this too. A Korean drama called Pride and Prejudice. In Korean, it's called 오만과 평균. And it's about prosecutors. So I saw that drama, and I was really, really just enamored by sort of the career that was shown through TV, really. Some people might have felt something similar to something like Suits or Better Call Saul, right? I haven't seen that one though.
Mhm.
But and this is when I was too young to really consider anything practical about what I wanted to do with my career. Uh, but it stuck with me. I never really took it too seriously until I went into college. I sort of announced that I would be pre-law. Back then, it didn't mean anything, but I had it in the back of my mind. And I knew that it didn't really matter what you majored in. That much I knew. Um, but throughout college, it sort of was in and out, and I wasn't thinking about it too much. I wasn't a very good undergrad student, so I sort of blew off my academics a lot, and so I didn't think I'd end up going to law school. I was actually an accounting major before I dropped it. Uh, I was a double major at the time. One of them was the main one was accounting, and I dropped it to take the LSAT, sort of as a litmus test to say, hey, you know what, maybe this will be more interesting because accounting, I was okay at it, but it didn't really interest me as much as I hoped it would. And I thought maybe law would do that. My parents weren't too happy that I was switching so late. This was my junior year of college. I studied self-study for the LSAT, and I was, I guess, happy with my results or satisfied enough to say, you know what, let's make this happen. Let's just make this my path now. So I applied to a bunch of schools, got in, and that's just how it all started. It happened really quickly at the end.
Yeah. And oh, just as an aside, what do your parents do? And were there any other lawyers in your family?
Yeah, so I think I'm a first generation legal professional, I guess. Um, my dad is a pastor, my mom is a nurse. She was a homemaker sort of in the early parts of my life. And I knew of one lawyer that my parents knew. I never really even spoke to him. So I think it's fair to say I knew basically zero lawyers until I went to undergrad. I had one or two professors that had graduated from law school, they practiced, and then now they were teaching business classes. But I really knew next to zero lawyers growing up. So it was a very, very foreign sort of career path to me, even by the time I had made it into law school.
I see. Yeah. So, tell us about your law school application, though. Like these days, is there like one application you can do that sends it out to all the law schools, or do you have to apply to every law school individually?
In a sense, individually,
Mhm.
many of them will sort of have uh, maybe something unique about their application process or the personal statement. Most of them require a personal statement, but some of them might have different word counts or word limits. But for the most part, your application process is going to look similar across each school, but you still have to submit a separate application and a separate fee as well. But sometimes you can get that waived, but a separate application to each school. So I applied to over 20. I think 22 was the number of schools I
Wow.
applied to. Yeah,
Wow.
'cause I wasn't I wasn't too picky about where I would end up.
Mhm.
Uh, maybe not as picky as I should have been. And I sort of applied really, really broadly, seeing what would stick. And that application process, I started early and I finished very, very late. So it was a long process for me.
Mhm. Yeah. So, I mean, didn't you have to pay application fees for every single school? That must have been really expensive.
Yeah, thankfully, I could at least front those costs with my personal savings. I kind of worked all throughout college, sometimes even full time. But a lot of times you can sort of just ask a school for a fee waiver. Every now
Mhm.
and then they might come to you if they like you as a potential applicant, and they might give you a fee waiver as well. But I was able to rack up about maybe half of the schools I applied to gave me fee waivers. Then
Nice.
there's also, yeah, and there's also the CAS fees where LSAC will process your application for you. Those, it's a little harder to dodge, and it's about $45 per application. So those you
Mhm.
pretty much have to pay. But the individual schools, I think they range, I don't know if they're the same now, but somewhere between 60 to maybe even $90 per school, I
Yeah.
think is the range that I was paying. And so I paid for about somewhere like 10 to 12 schools. So
Mhm.
it hurt my wallet for sure, but I tried to get as many waivers as possible.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's nice to hear that, you could just ask and then they might waive it. Yeah. So it helps to be proactive. So, like, did you want to stay in California for law school? Was that your preference?
I think I wasn't too picky about geography because, well, I don't have too much extended family in the States. I'd also
Mhm.
spent a year of undergrad in Michigan, um, and I just kind of wanted to follow the best, I guess, education opportunity rather than trying to stay close to wherever I was. But if I could be in California, I think that would have been best if I could pick all things equal. Um, I applied to a lot of California schools. I think there was a bias, especially to the Southern California schools, since that's where I was from. But I was applying pretty much nationally. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah, it really didn't matter where. And so
Yeah.
Notre Dame is in Indiana, so you could tell, I was willing to come all the way out here, back to the
Mhm.
Midwest, I guess, for a second.
Yeah. Did you experience culture shock when you wound up in Indiana? Because I don't think I've never even been to Indiana before.
Yeah, I know a lot of people do experience culture shock in ways. Like I said, I was in Michigan for a year,
Mhm.
so I didn't experience much culture shock then. It was my freshman year of undergrad. But and the second time around in Indiana now, I don't think I experienced much, but I know people that do. Um, I guess maybe in Southern California, it's very much a melting pot, so there weren't too many things that were that I hadn't really seen before. I think in Indiana, there's just a different balance. Um,
Mhm.
and I think I'm a pretty adaptable person, so I had no trouble finding my place here, and I like it here as well. I think I can like it in most places.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I mean, how diverse is your law school? Do you see many other Asian American students around campus?
Oh yeah, that's something they're working on. And I could see a difference from year to year actually. So my class was I think one of the most diverse classes that Notre Dame has had. However, the year after us, the 1L class now, they blow us out of the water.
Mhm.
It's much more diverse. They're also a bigger class. So I don't have the exact number, but if I guess maybe 10 to 15 Asian students, and then no, I'm sorry. We're probably closer to like 20, but I think we're over 30 now with the class beneath us. So they've been working on diversity. It's Notre Dame is it's not one of the most diverse schools out there, and that's no surprise. But they've been working very hard.
Mhm. Okay. Let's see. I'm sorry about that. I'm trying to get rid of some spammer that showed up in the chat box here. Okay. So let's see. Thank you all for being here, by the way. Hi, Tony. He wants to know how much are the rooming expenses or off-campus apartments, or do you have roommates? What's best on a budget? So do you care to share with us what your experience has been?
Yeah, I don't mind giving my exact numbers. So I live in University. It's slightly off campus, just right across the street from I guess the boundaries of campus, but it's university graduate housing. Uh, Indiana is not one of the most expensive places to live, but right around in South Bend here, right around campus, it is kind of pricey. But the place I'm at now, it's a little bit under $1,000. I live with a roommate, so I get to cut that by half. I know some other university provided housing can cost a lot more, closing in on double of what I pay here. So it might depend on sort of the location. Um, at least in Indiana, if you kind of live in a more like kind of away from campus, maybe you grab a house or some it can get a lot cheaper for sure. And so it's all about sort of here at least, it's sort of about finding the right kind of fit for you. And sometimes people are willing to shell out more for things like distance and security. Or I really appreciate the fact that I don't have to take care of my own internet. I'm off campus, but I'm still using campus Wi-Fi and it works great. So things like that. They're all things to consider. What's best on a budget, I think, is sort of not going for the most expensive places. If you have a university, um, like a college town right nearby, those places I think will usually be pricier than other places. So maybe avoid those and then get roommates. Just being able to cut whatever rent it is by half or making it a third is going to make a pretty big difference.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Having roommates can make it so much cheaper. Yeah, Georgetown, they had a dorm for the law school students, but I didn't live there. The rooms were really small. I don't know if it's really changed much there. And I didn't like the idea of having some strange roommate that I didn't even choose. So, because if you get a bad roommate, then that can totally mess up your first year experience if you're so
Yeah.
stressed out having to live with someone you don't like. So, anyway, so I had my own apartment. Luckily, my parents were paying for it. So I had my own apartment in Arlington near the courthouse metro. Do you drive to school, by the way, or do you walk to school?
It's both. So Notre Dame, we don't really have like sort of central, like a big parking structure in the middle. But the school, the law school building is right in the middle of campus. So you kind of park on the outside of campus. I drive there. It's about 2, 3 minutes of a drive, mostly because there's a couple lights. And then I walk about 10 minutes to the law school building.
Mhm. Oh, okay, great. Okay, well, this is a good question because you kind of touched on it when you said that you didn't know any attorneys or, you know, you hadn't talked to any attorneys when you were applying to law school or even when you were going to law school. So the nature lover wants to know, how should one approach someone to become his or her mentor? In fields like law, having a mentor seems important, especially those who don't have a lawyer family member. So usually you would go to events. Like I know at UNC, they have these minority pre-law student association receptions. And that's how I met one of my good friends who is African-American, and she was a law student at the time when I happened to show up at this like minority law, pre-law, whatever mingling thing. So she was a law student, I was a young attorney. And so we got to talking, and it turned out that she didn't have anything for the summer yet to do. And so I asked my firm if she could be an intern that summer. And so that's how we wound up getting to know each other. And she is really having a great career now. Hopefully one day she will be one of our guests. But I think, yeah, you just have to throw yourself out there and go to as many networking, like legal events, because most undergrads will have a pre-law society or pre-law student organization. And then when you're a law student, depending on what city you're in, there could be like an Asian Pacific American Bar Association chapter or any sort of, local county bar association. A lot of times they'll have events where students are welcome to attend. So you just have to go there. I mean, do you feel like you've gotten any mentors, Joseph? Are there any such programs at your school?
So do I have mentors? Absolutely. I have more than I ever imagined I would. And they've made such a big difference. I didn't have any until I entered law school, for sure. I wasn't looking, but I don't think they just happened to be out there as much. But when you're a 0L or in undergrad, I think the professors that I had that had gone to law school could kind of share their experience and maybe give some advice and what they thought. But once you're in law school, I think making connections is a really, really big part of it. At Notre Dame, they assign student mentors a lot. They make professors available. It's voluntary. The professors will sign up for certain organizations. So if we have a first generation professionals organization where you can get a professor to be your mentor. You can get 2Ls and 3Ls to be your mentor when you're a 1L. Another great resource is, especially if you're a diverse law student, then LCLD, I think the Leadership Council on Legal Diversity. I hope I got that right. They have a mentorship program, which was really valuable. I was able to connect to an attorney, and they found one for me that sort of matched my interests, sort of like my career interests, maybe the type of practice. He was also from Notre Dame, so they were able to sort of connect that for us, and they've been really, really important, I think, in my legal education so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because I started out at Hastings College of Law in San Francisco. And so I got a mentor assigned to me through the Asian American Law Students Group. And then the same thing happened at Georgetown too. And through the Asian Pacific American Bar Association in DC, I was assigned to a mentor. She's Korean American and she works for the US Department of Justice. And we're still good friends to this day. So I don't even think of her as a mentor. She's more like my friend and we keep in touch and stuff. So it's kind of amazing how you just never know who you meet might continue to, be in your life 25 years later or 20 years later, or you never know how somebody might help you or you can help them and stuff. And so, so you just kind of have to be sort of friendly and sociable and put yourself out there and don't be afraid to, contact people or ask them if they want to meet you for coffee or talk over the phone or whatever,
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. So let's see. Hey, Dad, thank you for being here. He's an attorney in DC. Do colleges ever discriminate? Well, that's kind of off topic here, but there are lawsuits where, I sort of think so, because I remember when I was an ethnic studies major at Berkeley, we did discuss this a lot, that some law schools or some graduate schools would give extra points to people if they would make some sort of like diversity like add more diversity to the school. Whereas, if they felt like they already had too many Asian or Asian American students, then you didn't stand out and you weren't going to get those extra points, when you were applying. So anyway, yeah, so I feel like there definitely is discrimination there. I don't know how you feel about that, but yeah.
I've heard as far as the possibility of at some schools, perhaps not presently, but the Asians might actually get the value of their points reduced if the applicant pool was already just way too favored. I don't know how true it is. I know there have been lawsuits. I think I read one of them, but I kind of forgot. It was I don't actually remember the outcome or what the facts were, but there have been lawsuits about it and people talk about it. I think one thing that is important is that in the application process, the term URM, underrepresented minority, applies to I think mostly the same types of minorities that it applies to in the legal industry for job outcomes, like diversity hiring, for instance. However, Asians aren't considered a URM, so that might be different. You might not be a minority when you're applying, but once you're in law school, you might suddenly be considered a minority for all other purposes. So there's a little bit of a dissonance there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just like, well, when you get out into the working field, there are plenty of employers and people who could care less about diversity at their workplace anyway. They're just not going to come out and say it. So, I mean, the most you can do is try to be the best person that you can be and get the best grades and try to give off a good impression. And hopefully, somebody will hire you. So, as much as I'd like to crow about discrimination and stuff, I mean, at least I did get hired by a handful of white people when I graduated from law school. So, yeah, you just kind of have to hope that there will be an employer that, isn't going to be racist or biased towards you up front or whatever, and that they will give you a job and give you the opportunity to progress as, based on your own work performance. Yeah. Okay. So debt-free dad tells you, shouldn't you be studying? Yeah, maybe we won't keep Joseph on this live stream for too long. He's got to get back to studying. Okay, so Serena, thank you for being here. She is thinking about applying to law school. She says, thanks for sharing. I wonder how the on-campus recruiting process is like at Notre Dame. What qualifications do students need to interview with firms and what type of employers visit? Okay, so have you taken part in OCI yet?
Yes, I have. And I think most students, I would say a majority probably do. It's heavily advertised internally, trying to get students to apply, and there's a heavy incentive for the school to actually place as many students as they can into jobs through OCIs. I guess on-campus recruiting, OCI is on-campus interviewing. That's the sort of acronym that's popularly used. So the qualifications is, I mean, it really depends on the firm. I don't think Notre Dame, we don't say there's a certain percentage of the class or like a certain class rank or a certain GPA that you need in order to participate. Anyone can sort of apply to all the firms. It's I guess, an open contest of sorts. But if a firm wants to sort of set a minimum qualification, then they're free to do that. What type of employers visit? It's going to be mostly firms. On-campus interviewing is it's not just a law firm thing as far as I'm aware. I think consulting firms and also investment banking, and these days accounting does it to a little bit, and tech does it a little bit as well. So it's sort of a process that many sort of private firms will hire their sort of entry level or right out of graduate students, right post graduation students from. It's going to be mostly firms. We do have some public interest. We do have some policy, and we do have some smaller firms as well, although mostly larger firms will sort of systematically partake in OCIs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and have there been other job fairs that you've been told about? Because I remember when I was at Georgetown, there were all these other job fairs like in Seattle or Atlanta or whatever, and it was up to us if we wanted to apply and fly out there at our own expense, obviously, to go to these other job fairs.
Yeah, so my OCIs, although it was in person, it was still sort of during COVID time. So I mean, we're still in it now. So there wasn't a lot of this whole flying out for jobs, although every now and then I heard of someone being offered to be flown out for a callback interview, I guess. Notre Dame has in the past had programs where they fly out students to, I think, some of the larger markets, maybe New York or Dallas. Don't quote me on it, but I know they've had programs like that that they sort of put aside because of COVID. Um, we did have a variety of, I think, things similar to resume collections, though, uh,
Mm-hmm.
where it's the same thing as an OCI application, but the firms are just they're willing to just view your application. They might not come in to interview 10 people at once, but they just sort of gather all the applications at once as a group.
Mm-hmm.
So it's similar to OCIs, whether you're going to interview or not. That's just it depends all on the firm side.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. And he says that you're smart for saving your money, having a roommate. Yeah. I heard first semester 1L grades are the hardest. What do you think is a competitive GPA for the first semester?
It
Well, the
all
higher the
depends.
better, right?
Yeah, the higher the better, the highest if you can.
Do you guys have like, are you graded on a B, C, D scale, or how does it work at your
Yes.
school?
So we don't give out A pluses, but it starts from A, and then we have A minuses, B pluses, all the way down to, I guess, however low it goes. It's people will rarely get lower than a C plus or a B minus here at Notre Dame, and they adhere to a curve. It's a fairly, I think, a fairly generous curve. It curves to about a 3.3, 3.4, somewhere in that ballpark. But what ultimately matters, because it's not going to trick any employers if your school curves to 3.8 and everybody has these super high GPAs, they're still going to have ways to know sort of who's winners, I guess, at your school, and who's near the top, who's near the median. The median is oftentimes important. So however your school decides to sort of form the curve, I think is less important than where compared to your classmates you stand. And that'll sort of determine how competitive you are for different kinds of jobs.
Mhm. Yeah, and what about law review? Did you try out for law review?
So I didn't expect to make law review. I did do the process, so I'm on a secondary journal. But I have friends that are on law review if there's any questions about that.
Mhm.
I think I've heard a lot about their experience. Obviously, they work very hard to get there. There's a lot of work that comes with it, and it's a different beast altogether compared to the secondary journals, at least at our school. And we have a fair number of journal spots. So a lot of students will be on journals, and my class was in particular very small. So I think most people that wanted to be on a journal, in my class at least, was able to get a journal position because they didn't change how many spots there were based on how big the class was.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I see. Yeah, so a lot of employers are looking for the law journal or any sort of law journal leadership position looks good too. Yeah. So Nature Lover also asks, do you find with COVID, most if not all networking or continuing education classes going virtual is not as great? Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not as good because how do you really network if you're just looking at somebody's picture on the computer?
It's kind of worked out really well for me.
Mhm.
And that might not be the experience for everyone, but I found it to be very convenient because I tried to network a lot with people that were working in big law while I was job searching, and most of those firms, they just sent people home. Uh, and they're just, they're very comfortable. I've heard that, work from home has made them sort of maybe work more on the clock, just kind of increasing their availability. I'm not sure about that, but many of them were just very, very willing to just have 20, 30-minute Zoom conversations, and having a high volume of networking effort pay off, I think, worked in favor of sort of remote, at least in my experience. But I didn't get to do much where I got to sit down with someone over coffee or lunch, get to talk to them face to face. And I could see that being very, very helpful as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Let me scroll down. We have a bunch of comments here. Yeah. There's been talk for years about a national standardized bar exam as opposed to state specific. Many older attorneys loathe the idea. What's your take as a law student?
Oh, let's see.
That's kind of a out of kind of unusual question. I think it is better to have state specific though, because different states have different laws. So I think it's important to still have state specific bar exams.
I think it might be a little relevant because California is notoriously difficult. I just took a corporate law class last semester, so I'm sure maybe taking the bar exam in Delaware, you might want to test different things. I'm not sure, but at the same time, I think it'd be nice to just be able to study for the bar, for any bar. Sort of being mobile with your career, I think, is more popular these days. Although I think right now, I can't tell the future, but right now, I think I want to be in California for pretty much all of my legal career.
Mhm.
But you never know, right? So I've heard attorneys complaining about, when they have to switch jobs, that they have to take another bar exam. I think one benefit of having a sort of standardized bar is that law schools might be more willing to prepare you for it while you're in law school. Perhaps tailoring their classes more towards bar prep, because a place like Notre Dame, they send their students to pretty much, I don't know, every single state, I think. Um, or so it's a very portable degree. And I know maybe schools that have less portable degrees do focus more on preparing their students to pass the bar exam for their particular state, because they expect most of their students to stay in. So I don't know. I'd be curious about how that works out as well, but I'm
Yeah,
not
I
sure
don't
maybe change
think
will happen before I take it.
yeah, I don't think it's gonna happen though anyway. Yeah. Oh, how intense is the homework and how much do the instructors expect out of you? Are there any mock trials or okay. So would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, there's no homework that you have to turn in. You do have to show up to class prepared, really only on the risk that you get called on, or you also risk sort of falling behind in understanding the material as they discuss it in class. But I think in general, more studying is better as long as you can it's sustainable. You're not killing yourself over it. You're studying smart, so you're not just doing things that waste time because it feels like busy work, but as much work as you can put in reasonably, it seems to be how much people tend to do. I think the instructors, at least at my school, I think we have an amazing faculty here at Notre Dame. I think they have fairly high expectations of their students, but at the same time, they've never been, I guess, disrespectful, or I rarely think they cross the line uh, and hold expectations above where students themselves could hold themselves. Um, and people have different opinions on an individual basis, but that's been my experience with mock trials. Learning how to do trials in law school is not too common. We have a course in Notre Dame, I think it actually started here. It's called Intensive Trial Advocacy, where or comprehensive, either in 1 week or across the semester, where they teach you how trial works, and you actually do a mock trial. And it's a lot of information that you have to teach. It's not required. Students that are interested in doing it can definitely do it, and you get experiential credit for it. You learn a lot. You have to suit up and everything. They bring in judges and even local juries actually. So it's very realistic, sort of simulated uh, training course. But at the same time, their trial experience is as I've heard, it's getting harder to find in practicing attorneys because there's just fewer trials, and also there aren't that many uh, lawyers that just have that much trial experience in areas that they're looking for it. So it becomes very valuable to have it. So it's up to you. And if you want to go into something like a more transactional practice, I don't think you ever have to worry about trials.
Yeah.
Litigation,
Yeah,
I've
that's
heard you don't have to worry too much.
yeah, I mean, it's very rare that attorneys in general have jury trials. So, I mean, I myself have only had one jury trial and a few bench trials and other, hearings in front of judges and stuff. But yeah, that's typically an elective that people can take their second or third year. Yeah. So, is the New York bar exam really the hardest? Is there a limit? Yeah, I'm not sure if there is a limit, but I would say if you keep failing the bar exam at least 3 times, then it's probably not going to happen because people who are repeat bar takers have even lower and lower percentage chances of passing. Um, so, I don't think the New York, I mean, I never took the New York bar exam, but I don't think it's really the hardest because, when you look at the percentage of people who pass any sort of bar exams, it's also out of the number of people that actually want to take the bar exam. So, for example, California looks like it has a very low bar passage rate because there are thousands and thousands of people who flood the state after they graduate from law school and want to take the California bar exam. And some of those people are from unaccredited schools or non-ABA accredited schools, online law schools. And so that's why it looks like the California bar exam is really hard to pass when maybe it isn't really. So, yeah, I don't know.
Say that I know. I haven't heard of a limit though.
Yeah, same here, but it definitely costs money because every time you want to take the bar exam, you're going to be paying hundreds of dollars. And then there's also a big fee just to, submit your application and do that character and fitness application. So there's more money involved. So if I would, once again, I would say if you flunk the bar more than 3 times, then you might as well just kind of give up and realize, okay, maybe you just don't have it, or try to take a different state's bar exam or do something else. Yeah. But hopefully that's not an issue for you, of course, Joseph. So, yeah.
Yeah. Let's hope. And then I did hear of one, I don't know if it's an urban myth, I guess, but somebody did tell me they knew someone that they graduated law school with that took the bar over 20 times before giving up. I'm not sure if that's actually something that someone did. It sounds quite insane, but I could sort of see the whole sunk cost building up.
Yeah, exactly. After a while, you just got to think like, okay, I need to make money now, and maybe I'm not going to be a licensed lawyer. Yeah. So Tony asks, in your classes, are there any lessons drilled into you? I don't think any of the professors really drilled any lessons into us. I mean, other than you have to be ethical and you have to pay attention to what the law is, but there really wasn't much practical knowledge that was imparted upon us. At least that was my experience. What about yours so far, Joseph?
Well, so far, like I said, I took the trial course. That was probably the most practical one I've had so far. This semester I'm taking professional responsibility, and I know professors can construct their course in many different ways. I think ours sort of does focus on the practical consequences of the ABA model rules. So that one might be a little bit more practical, but we just started. And for the most part, I think legal law classes aren't centered on the practical aspects. So I agree with you. I don't think there will be too much of it in law school.
Yeah, you really learn on the job or during your summer jobs. Okay, so the next question is, how do you pay for your law school given that Notre Dame has a high cost of attendance? Isn't it like more than $60,000 a year for just tuition?
Yeah, it is. And then you have to add in living expenses. So part of it is scholarships. Part of it is loans. A significant part of it is loans. And then also, I had some of my own savings to help offset, I think, some of the initial costs, but I blew through all of it by now. So, you got to come up with the money somehow. And I think future me is going to have to sort of pay it off gradually.
Yeah. So you mentioned scholarships. Are these things that the school gave you or some outside source?
Yeah, so for people that aren't familiar in law school admissions, you can oftentimes get merit-based scholarships from your schools. Things like your LSAT and your GPA. You can also negotiate a little bit. It's not gonna, turn 10,000 into 100,000, but there's some negotiation involved as well, which I got to do. And so these scholarships can range from, just a couple $1,000s per year up to full tuition. Some schools have the rare sort of tuition plus a stipend, and it's really only the most merited, usually based on LSAT and GPA. Only the most merited applicants will sort of have access to those scholarships, but it can range anywhere from and a lot of times they don't give out scholarships as well, so it can range anywhere from 0 to the whole thing or even more.
Yeah. My younger sister went to UNC Law School, and just out of the blue, the school just gave her a $5,000 discount every year on tuition, on in-state tuition. So it was a really good deal. And I don't even know, it wasn't like really stated like this is you are the winner of a blabbity blab scholarship. They just gave her this discount. I'm like, that's pretty nice. So you guys just definitely don't know, until you apply and get accepted into a law school, whether they're going to give you a discount. So in a way, it's kind of like they deliberately like pump up the tuition price to make it seem like, oh, but you get a $20,000 per year scholarship. So it is now only 40,000, So,
Yeah,
but
there's a couple things I've heard about how law schools use tuition to make their money. Is that yes, I think you're right. They do pump it up, but a lot of the students that don't get any scholarships are sort of paying for the students to attend that have gotten the most scholarships. And transfer students will rarely get scholarships. So if you did well in your first year and you want to transfer up to a school, you usually won't get to carry over any scholarship or get new scholarship. So you sort of have to pay full tuition for the last 2 years. That puts a lot of money in the school's wallet. And then also, some schools will have conditional scholarships, where if your GPA falls below a certain level, then you lose your scholarship, and now you're paying more than before. So law schools have all these different ways of sort of making their money back, I guess. But a lot of times they do seem very generous with their money as well.
yes. Okay. Yeah. And I guess the theme of today's show was really supposed to be what you wish you had known before you went to law school. So this kind of follows along this question about what advice can you give to someone before he starts his first semester? So,
Uh, so I think the first semester, as many might know, might be the most important semester you have. And there's a lot that you sort of have to learn almost on the spot. It can be a trial by fire, and you sort of have to get things right quickly. I think outside of the academics, which you can't really do much about until you're in school, things you can work on are sort of making sure that you have a reliable sort of life structure for yourself, right? So things like if you haven't lived on your own before and you need to learn how to cook, that might actually be time well spent, because you don't want to, spend time figuring out how to buy groceries if you've never done it before. You want to have balance in your life, so you want to be able to sort of uh, maybe get a fitness routine going, or get your finances in order. So, even just outside of the law school tuition and the living expenses, if you fall short on funds at any point in the semester, it can be a real problem. I think directly for helping you maybe succeed in law school, I think instead of learning the law, which a lot of people try to do, I tried to do it a little bit. It didn't help at all. Is if you aren't used to reading a lot, that might be something you want to practice, perhaps over the summer. Just reading things like they can be fiction, they can be nonfiction. If you've never read philosophy before, or anything that uses sort of logic, you might want to try dabbling in that, and just learning to read sort of for hours at a time without losing your focus. I think it will be valuable if you can't do that yet. So as a 0L, I think, this one is actually pretty important, I think, is work on your typing speed. If your words per minute is, below 80, I think you should actually work diligently to get that up as high as you can. If it's around 100, 110, I think you're okay, but, typing speed is very important for your exams. If you're taking notes on your computer in class, a lot of times it can be hard to keep up, unless you can sort of transcribe things fast enough. So I think typing speed is very important as a law student.
yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I also feel like before you go to law school, you should try to do something fun. Like if you ever wanted to travel, well, now things are different with COVID, but for example, go go to a different country and learn another language, or go visit your relatives in another country. Those are things that you really got to do before you go to law school, because once you start law school, it's almost like this like hamster wheel where you can't get off.
Yeah.
Because during the summer you're supposed to be working to get work experience. You can't just tell a law firm that, oh, well, I wanted 3 weeks off so I can go to Asia to travel and see my relatives, or Yeah, because for example, I always wanted to learn Spanish, but I never learned Spanish when I was younger. So when I was working as an attorney, it was so hard to try to take Spanish classes after work. And then I tried to go to Costa Rica for maybe 1 or 2 weeks when I first started my own practice, but I couldn't really even take off a week or two because I had some clients. And so yeah, enjoy your life that last summer before law school starts. Do something that you're not going to really be able to do once you start that whole law school and then start working. Yeah, because otherwise it looks kind of bad. I think like if you're a law school student and you just want to goof off during the summer, or you take a break after you graduate from law school before you start applying for jobs, I mean, that definitely makes your chances of getting a good job a lot less. They'll think something's wrong.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. First getting your relationships in order and maybe managing expectations. If you live with your parents, or if you have a significant other, then sort of telling them, "Hey, law school's going to take a lot of my time. Things are going to be different moving forward." Communicating that, I think, is important. And then, not just having a hobby or some activity before law school, but it's great for your balance, sort of study and life balance, if you can continue to incorporate it reasonably throughout law school. Just have a little bit something that can take your mind away from the books for little bits of time. I think it's great for balance, and it's hard to get it started once you're in law school. So before might be better.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Was there anything in particular that you think people should be forewarned about before they go to law school?
Forewarned about. Let's see. Yeah, your classmates won't know anything at the start. Listen to people that have been through what you've been through over your classmates. If anyone walks in on day one, uh, you know, acting like they know the material or they know the best study habits, that should work in theory work for everyone, and they make these bold statements, just brush it off. Think about it later once you've sort of realized um, what sort of the more common advice you might get from people that have succeeded in that process already are giving. So people will have a lot of opinions, and it's best to keep a level head by sort of getting advice from people that actually know what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, you just don't know going in like who is supposedly the smarter person or the smartest person. And just because someone's being a loudmouth and always trying to answer the professor's questions, that doesn't mean anything as to how they're going to wind up in the class ranking. So, yeah, thank you, Debt Free Dad, for your donation. Yeah, he suggests that we watch A Lawyer Goes into the Bar. I've never even heard of that, but I guess I'll go look for it. Yeah.
Haven't either. I think I will.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I think I'll look it up after too.
Yeah. Okay. Lawyer goes into the bar. Okay. Okay. So, hi, Stephen. He says, thanks for sharing your experience. Are there many California firms doing on campus hiring at your school?
So, because of the pandemic, on-campus hiring, it has been a little bit different the past 2 years, and I suspect it might not have reverted completely to normal this coming summer as well. But you never know. But at least for my experience, many of the national firms that have California offices will make their California offices available for you to apply to. So they'll interview you for perhaps at the screener level, the first round interview. You might interview for multiple offices, or you can state your interest in particular offices, and the callback level, will be determined from that office. There aren't too many California only firms that sort of would come to Notre Dame saying we want to partake in your on-campus hiring. There were a couple, but in my experience, and I think from the experiences I've heard of from other California-bound students, you have to do a lot of work on your own. You have to network, you have to job hunt, sort of maybe fill out applications through the portals of the website instead of hoping that they come to you through the OCI program. So it's far away from Indiana, California, so you got to put in some work on your own, and I don't think that's unreasonable.
Yeah, definitely. And If you're not looking for the mega big international law firms, you could wait until you actually move back to California to apply to the places, because usually they'll take you more seriously if you're actually already living in the state when you apply, or if you've already passed a California bar exam. So there are many different ways for people to get jobs outside of the on-campus interviews. Yeah, so Serena asked, can you share how you allocated or managed your time studying for the LSAT on your own, preparing for the law school materials, and what your study routine was like?
So I self-studied for the LSAT. I did it in 3 months. It was a very intense 3 months. I actually quit my retail job to study for the LSAT, and I think I was putting in, somewhere between 8 to 10 hours a day. I didn't realize I was burnt out until afterwards. But thankfully, I don't think that burnout manifested during or before exams. But for about 12 weeks, I was studying every single day, and I self-studied. I bought, for me, it was Power Score. The Power Score, I think it's they have what they call a Bible for each section of the LSAT. And I worked through all of those, and I took practice tests. I took probably over 50 practice tests. Uh, Sometimes I would just take another one to see, if my score would magically go up by luck. And that's not a good study strategy. But for the most part, you're going through these workbooks. It doesn't have to be through PowerScore, although I'm a huge fan of them, and their podcast was really, really helpful for me. But sort of going through these workbooks and learning how to answer specific kinds of questions. It's not uh, you're not being tested on the whole possible universe of logical reasoning. There's, I think, maybe 17, 18, or 19 specific kinds of questions. Logic games as well, they have specific kinds of games that you can improve on. So I think it is definitely possible for anyone to self-study. Uh, I don't discredit the effectiveness of any prep programs. However, I haven't done them myself. And for me, over the course of 3 months, I was able to put in, I think, the work that I wanted to, and it paid off. So yeah, that was
Yeah.
my strategy.
Okay. Yeah. And what about your study routine as a 1L? Like, did you just shut yourself in your apartment and study all the time, or go to the library, or what?
It was a little bit easier because, well, so during my year, not many students will actually have been in person uh, because of the pandemic. However, Notre Dame actually was in person. So we had masks, we had distancing. It meant less social events as well. So there was a little bit more time to study, but at the same time, you're always competing against your classmates. That's how your grade comes out. If everyone's putting in 100 hours a week of studying, then uh, not everyone gets rewarded for that. So I sort of just put in my time daily. I had a consistent routine. Thankfully, not too much was disturbing, my day to day or my week to week study routine. And by the end of it, I got through all the material. I took the exams, but at the same time, I think I had a pretty balanced uh, 1L. I was getting enough sleep, which is very important. I did things like exercising and light socializing where I could, and I kept up my hobbies to a degree, and I also worked hard. So I think striking a balance and finding out what works for you is most important, but also just putting in time where you can, because most times I think disturbances will show up at some point in the semester. And so if you haven't been consistent until then, it's going to become very difficult to recover. So be consistent when you can for as long as you can.
Yeah, and maybe that's an advantage that you have at Notre Dame, is that it seems like there's really not that many distractions. I mean, it's not like you think of wherever you are in Indiana as being some like fun party town, you know, because I feel like I got totally distracted being in DC. There was just so much going on and different events and places to go.
The student body will find their own ways to make sure they can get enough fun if they want to. Uh, Notre Dame drinking is a pretty big deal, and I think in law school and probably the legal industry as a whole, I know drinking is kind of present. So there's a lot you can do still, even if there isn't too much surrounding your school, and uh, and there's nothing wrong with engaging in that. A lot like your friends, your classmates will be your first networks, I guess, coming out of law school. So it's very important to forge relationships with them. But at the same time, I think everyone knows that academics should be prioritized.
That's right. Okay. And Tony wants to know, do law schools hire students as TAs? Not usually as TAs, but I remember at Georgetown we had a lot of professors hiring research assistants. So that paid a decent amount of pay. So that might be a kind of job, but I don't recall there being any TAs. I mean, there were some law students that were helping to teach the legal research and writing classes, but that's about it. What about at your school?
Yeah, at Notre Dame for our 1L doctrinal classes, they all have TAs. So it'll be 2Ls or 3Ls, one per class. So one for each professor teaching a class. They sort of have their own little sessions where they sort of have slides and review the material on a very foundational level. So it's sort of for perhaps people that were absent for the week for various reasons, or people that don't understand a particular portion of the subject matter. It's there for them, and I actually don't know if they get paid. It's usually like one of the few top grades from the class last year that gets to do it, and I wasn't that. So, but research assistant. So I was a full-time research assistant for my 1L summer, uh, and I still am a research assistant. I work up to 10 hours, but usually much fewer throughout the week. And to my knowledge, or at least at Notre Dame, professors hire a lot of research assistants, both full-time and part-time.
Yeah, yeah, it's good because then you get like that mentorship from the professor. Hopefully, they can continue to help you in your career. Yeah, so this one, yeah, firms forcing partners to retire. I've never heard of that, but what do I know? We're going to have another live stream in a few weeks with a law partner at a firm in Raleigh, North Carolina. So he's going to talk to us so we can ask him that question. Yeah. And why is tuition so expensive now in North America? So I guess it's because they want the money. This is a money making business for a lot of universities and schools. That's why they exist also, is because they want to generate some profits. So as long as there are consumers that are willing to pay the whopping big tuition rates, then they're going to just keep raising up the tuition more and more every year. And then they give these, sort of scholarships to some of the students, but yet ultimately, that brings in more big bucks so they can pay the administrators hefty salaries and benefits. So, I mean, that's my explanation, because people are willing to pay it or take out loans to pay it. So it's not going to go down at all. Yeah. Okay. So we're almost at an hour, Joseph. So do you have any parting words or anything you'd like to say to people who are thinking about going to law school?
Uh, yeah, I think maybe the most important part, in my opinion, is uh, spending a lot of time thinking, or at least reflecting on the goals that you set for yourself, managing expectations, and also being diligent about figuring out, I think, the process related things. So when it comes to law school admissions, I think I told you this before we started the stream, but I watched your interview with Professor Brian Tamanaha, and he was talking about, there's a lot of information out there that you can do research about these schools and come to a very informed decision. Even though you can't, it's not going to be a magic 8 ball, but it tells you a lot about, job outcomes and what you can expect and the risks that you're putting yourself through. Um, be very diligent about, sort of researching into that, gathering as much knowledge as possible. And this also extends to your job search once you're in law school as well. So talk to as many people as you can. Just, trying to talk to people because you want to learn more can also help forge relationships. And just immerse yourself in the experience and try to come out the other end a much better person and professional.
Yeah. Well, do you have any idea what you would like to do after you graduate? You said go back to California, right?
Yeah. So I have a summer associate position lined up back in California. I hope to turn it into a post-grad return offer. And it's with Big Law. I don't know how long I'll last. Big loss turnover rate is nothing that, people need to try to hide. But that's at least where I'll start. And there are some other opportunities that I have in mind that I might want to explore. But sort of like how I entered law school, I wasn't looking too far ahead from too early on. So I might just have to figure out as I go along.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on the show and answering so many questions from everybody out there. I really appreciate your time. So we'll just say goodbye to everybody out there in YouTube land. And Joseph, can you please stay on for another minute or so? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here. And
Thank you, everyone.
next live stream, I think we are actually not having a legal guest, but we're going to have a friend of mine who has published some more Asian American literature. So he will be our next guest next weekend, and I'll put that up on the YouTube channel soon enough within the next few days. So thank you guys, and hope you'll join in the next live stream. Okay, are you still there?